Flexbox is a whole module and not a single property, and I believe that you should understand the terminology and concepts behind Flexbox. So Flexbox involves a lot of things, including its whole set of properties. Some of them are meant to be set on the container, known as the Flex container, whereas the other ones are meant to be set on the children, known as Flex items. The Flex container is created by adding a value of Flex to the display property of any element, and it sets the context for Flexbox layout. It can be any block level or inline elements like div, header, even a span element. And then every element that is a direct child of the Flex container is called a Flex item. And a Flex container can have several Flex items. So let's explain this with some examples. Here we have a container with 4 divs with different colors. If you go to your CSS and target this container, and then within this declaration block you set the value of the display property to Flex, now this container has become a Flex container and these boxes have become Flex items. I believe that it is really important to differentiate between the Flex container and the Flex items, because as I said in the beginning of this lecture, there are some properties that work only on Flex containers and there are other properties that work only on Flex items. In addition to the Flex container and Flex items, to really understand how Flexbox works, you need to understand the logic that Flexbox follows to lay out the elements. So you need to know about the axes along which a browser will place the Flex items. This may be a little bit tricky, so I need your attention here. Flexbox follows 2 axes that determine the layout direction of Flex items. These elements are laid out following either the main axis or the cross axis or the 2 axes. Please keep in mind, in a Flexbox layout, everything is relative to these 2 axes. So the main axis is the primary axis along which Flex items are laid out. It defines the direction of the Flex items in the Flex container. And the cross axis runs perpendicular to the main axis. So in our example, when we gave to the container a display of Flex, by default our elements are sitting next to each other from the left to the right. By default, the main axis starts from the left to the right side, and the cross axis starts from the top to the bottom. But there are some properties that you can use in order to have control over these 2 axes. For example, you can make your main axis go from top to bottom and the cross axis from left to right. I believe these are the 2 essential parts of Flexbox. You have the Flex container and the Flex items, and you have the main axis and the cross axis. If you don't really understand these 2 concepts, Flexbox will make you feel stupid. And that's what happened to me when I was first learning Flexbox. I've been using some properties that are for the Flex container on the Flex items and the opposite, and it has been really confusing without knowing the difference between them. And also, if you don't make the difference between the main axis and the cross axis, laying out elements using Flexbox properties can be very tricky.